let's talk about logistics, the supply chain. At the heart of all businesses is moving those goods from one end of the country or from the factory down to the market. That is a huge one, and we know here in Nigeria the freight and logistics market is estimated for this year, at the end of this year, to cost about $10.95 billion. And that's supposed to hit $15.05 billion by 2030. That's in 5 years. E-commerce is at the heart of it. We had that conversation, with the data center and what data has to do. E-commerce is going to generate about $10.1 billion, beg your pardon, by 2027. The market value of that, the expected compound annual growth rate is placed at about 6.57%. Key drivers should be expanding manufacturing, e-commerce. We saw the services sector driving the rebased GDP, and of course, e-commerce at the heart of it. Let's find out how we can achieve all of this by building an integrated ecosystem right there. We're doing it with the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Kawai Technologies Limited, Mr. Kimbo Akin Olugbade. Mr. Olugbade, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, how are you?
Good. So we talk about data, we talk about the manufacturing sector, we talk about services, but at the heart of it, we have the logistics and supply chain at the heart of it. The issue of lack of coordination in that ecosystem seems to be one weakness that Nigeria has, but please confirm if that's true or not.
Yeah, I think the big problem is that the system operates in silos. Every player is operating almost independently, building out their own rail lines, as it were, to get their goods from the manufacturer down to the end user. And that's compounding the problem with pricing, and it makes it just more difficult to get things done. We talk a lot about the circular economy. The circular economy can only work if inputs from one end go to another company for them to produce and get things done. So we have to now see how the government, as well as private sector, can help connect the dots. How do we get our farm produce, for instance, how do we get that from point A to point B to maybe the warehouses, then down to the manufacturers, and then onwards to the supermarkets and markets where consumers eventually need those. And that same thing happens across all the industries.
So who should do this? Do we need to create a ministry?
No,
do we need to create a ministry for this again?
No. So on the government side, we need government to just help us with infrastructure. Make sure the roads are there. I was on a train to Ibadan a couple of weeks ago, and I was very happy to see halfway through around Ewekoro, I saw there were rail carriages for freight. So that means goods and products are moving by rail, but we need a lot more of that. If you take America, this is where Vanderbilt made his money, Carnegie Mellon, JP Morgan, James Hill. These are the men who built America, as it were, 100, 200 years ago. We need the equivalent in Nigeria. So we need the rail lines to really get all over the country so things can move. Road networks, this is highly important. We know the state of our roads, but it's getting better slowly. On the private sector side, we need to start thinking not just of our own businesses, but our businesses in relation to other businesses. What do I have that could be an input into a secondary business? There's a project we did, for instance, earlier in the year, and ordinarily it would have required importation. It was something to do with a hospital in Abuja, and it was the lab surfaces. And the long and short of it is we were able to get the stainless steel in Nigeria, get that then laser cut and bent in Lagos as well, and then get that finished to the end requirement by the customer and sent onto Abuja. We need more of that. We need more discussion, more interlocking value chain connections in the industry.
I guess that's why you have chambers and you have associations. These are supposed to help cut out the gaps and bring, from maybe one end product being the raw material for another process to begin.
Yes, so I'm Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I think one of the main advantages of an institution like the LCCI is that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of companies, and you being a member, you get to see what other companies are doing. and then that gives you ideas of, okay, maybe I can plug in here, maybe I can plug in there. So I think it's putting those companies together that gives you the potential opportunities to change things in that way.
What about government policy? Is it pushing, industries towards that,
Yeah, I mean, the government's doing its part. They're trying, and people forget that Nigeria is a massive, massive country. And there's so many different sectors, so many different states, each with its own peculiarities. So I want to say that the government is trying its best in a difficult situation, but they still need to do more.
But it's still the government,
Yeah,
exactly,
yes.
that we need to do. But so when we look at our supply chain, you talked about infrastructure and, the need for cooperation between, different arms. How else do you think we can optimize there? Because, for instance, when we talk about agriculture, we talk about post-harvest losses. When you look at the supply chain, you see that is a weakness. There are lots of weaknesses.
Significant weakness.
Right there, This week I spoke to someone from poultry, and he talked about how at the farm gate, eggs are now cheaper, but it hasn't translated to the market. There's the supply chain issue right there. So what do we really need to cut out some of these things and make it more efficient?
So we're back to the infrastructure problem. So if you take agriculture, tomatoes, we lose something like 30% from farm to market. Why is that? There's no cold chain. There are no refrigerated trucks. None of that exists. And you can understand why people don't want to make that investment. You invest in that, and then you have bad roads, and then these trucks are significantly more expensive than ordinary trucks, and then you're going to then deteriorate them faster because the road networks are bad, and then you lose that investment. So it's not yet worthwhile for people to make that investment. So the government can help us with make the roads better. It is a simple fix that has a multiplier effect on the economy. If you take other aspects of agro, you mentioned poultry. Funnily enough, years and years ago, I had a poultry farm. And what was the issue? Why did we stop doing that? It was because of consistency. Your pickups have to be scheduled. They have to be carried in special trucks. The end user wants a specific weight to get the personnel that are going to make sure you get the 2 kg chicken weight, and it became very hard to have consistency along. So I think education is also needed as well. You need to educate the farmers. You need to educate the smallholder farmers. I was in Kano last year, and a friend has 6 farms and was waiting to determine when best to plant. And I was like, why are you waiting? I was like, because he didn't know when it was going to rain. I was like, in 2024 at the time, it's a Google search. It was like, weather report for the next 10 days. And what happens there is because some people had already planted, his farm harvest will then be at least 2 weeks after the other people, which means they will get the best prices. So again, farmers need information. The government at the local government level could help with that, getting the information to farmers. Tractor programs. I know the government just did an investment in, I think it was 3,000 tractors. Things like this might be more useful to farmers. Tractor hiring programs. We did a project in Damaturu years ago, which the tractors were then divided into local governments and then rented out to the individual farmers on a daily basis. But the problem there is who is responsible for the maintenance of those tractors. So maybe tweaking that model a little bit so that the stakeholder is maybe the largest farmer in the community and they have a vested interest in keeping those tractors running. That might help.
Yeah, and I mean, we're almost out of time, but I'm thinking if it's this difficult within the country, we're talking about exports. That would be even more difficult.
Yes and no. So one of the issues with exports is standardization. And we have the SON is doing a decent job, could be better. We have private sector participants like SGS, Bureau Veritas. You need to get your products tested. Make sure they conform to the international standards. Make sure the moisture content, if it's agri-related or charcoal or anything like that, make sure the moisture content is appropriate. Because these are things that trip us up when we get into the international markets. If it's medical-related products, talk to NAFDAC. Make sure you have all the required certifications. At the same time, over-regulation is a little bit of a problem. If you take cosmetics, for instance, in the UK, topical cosmetics aren't really that regulated. Why? Because it's on the surface of the skin. So you don't need to be as stringent with the regulation. whereas in Nigeria, even topicals are heavily regulated. So the government needs to know when to not push so hard and when to step back to encourage the sector.
All right, thank you so much for that, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Kawai Technologies Limited, Mr. Kimbo Akin Olubade. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.